Welcome to Straight Talk with Carly Alyssa Thorne. And I have with me today Sean Stephenson. And we're going to be talking about a few things that is very dear to my heart. First of all, we're talking about his wonderful book, Get Off Your Butt. And we're also going to be talking about bullying, which is something I would love to eliminate from society. So welcome, Sean.
Thank you for having me.
So I would love for you to talk to me about a few things. One is I'd love for people to know a little bit about who you are, and then we're going to get into a few other topics. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about who is Sean.
Perfect. So normally what people are most interested in hearing is how I came into this world and why do I appear to look so different from the average society. And so I was born with a rare condition called osteogenesis imperfecta, also known as a brittle bones disorder. And when I was born, the doctors were totally convinced that I was going to die within the first 24 hours of my life. So my parents were in the process of preparing for my death, and they rallied together and together decided, well, if we get one day with him, let's just fill him with love for one day. And fortunately, all those doctors were wrong, and I'm still here, and I have no intention on going anywhere else for a long while. And my life has been unique. I was certainly blessed with incredible parents, but also a great community, and I was very fortunate to be born in a country that there are quite a bit of legal setups for people with disabilities to be able to have buildings be adapted, not get discriminated against in being hired at employment. And there's just so many wonderful opportunities that are afforded to those with disabilities in this country that are not in most of the rest of the world. And so I certainly am grateful for that. But with this condition, had a lot of bone fractures growing up. By the time I was 18, I'd fractured over 200 times. Something as simple as sneezing would break a rib or a collarbone. And just had many years of my life spent healing in casts and bandages. And even with all that physical pain, I lived a wonderful childhood. I'm very grateful for the lessons that pain brought to me. And I've created a life that I'm very proud of. I've traveled the world for the past 17 years as a professional speaker. I've written a few books in my life that have gone all around the world in over 10 different languages. Happily married to the woman of my dreams, and I'm just very blessed to be able to go into the world on programs like yours and in auditoriums around the world to share my message that there's no reason for insecurity. You know, I love how you said you want to get rid of bullying, and I believe that bullying, which we'll get into in a moment, but it's a parallel to, or it's the symptom of my greatest interest in ridding from the world, which is insecurity. That insecurity is plaguing the planet, and I believe that it is an outdated component to the human psychology that's not necessary anymore. I believe that we have evolved as a species that feeling of I'm not enough can be transcended now just by the proper education and setting up your life so that you do feel like you're enough. And so I'm happy to go down any direction you want today, and I'm grateful to be a part of this program. And let's see what we can do to help those that are watching.
So the first thing I'd like to touch upon, as you said, you've had a challenging growing up with, and you've learned from lessons of pain. And I can absolutely relate to that. Most people know I've had 29 surgeries, which is, I know nothing in comparison to what you've been through. And they're always asking me, how can you be so positive? You know, I've done interviews from the hospital, and they're like, how can you be so positive? And I keep on trying to tell people is, you learn, like you said. So I do want to touch upon that, because I don't think people understand that you have to learn through things, and it doesn't matter what you're going through, that you can grow through adversity. And it doesn't matter if you're in pain or you're not in pain. You have the choice to be negative or cranky or, you know, or mean in that moment. and as you know, because you've been through a very challenging growing up, and you said you had a happy childhood despite being in caste or whatever you're going through. So I do want you to touch upon that a little bit to explain to people that no matter what you're going through in that moment, or having been in the caste or going through what you're going through, how did you deal with it? I think that's a really important thing for people to understand, that just because you are going through surgery or you have a broken bone or you are in a certain state of mind, and look where you are today and look what you've done with your life, married, written books, traveled the world, that you had a choice in your attitude to be where you're at. So how did you, change your mindset, or how did you choose to be happy or positive? And that's not fake, because people ask me all the time, there's no way you can be, it's not that I don't have moments of being down or being negative. Of course, we're human. However, I still have the choice of how I choose to be mindset-wise in my daily life. So how did you choose to be in your state of mind? Do you know what I'm saying? I like to state how you are.
So, first of all, let's just address the fact that it's a choice I have to make every day, to this day. Some people assume, and it's understandable, but they assume that I went through a period of time where I was negative or sad, and then I had some kind of epiphany, and then all of a sudden I became positive, and I've been positive ever since. That's actually false. The truth is that there are days that are still discouraging to me, just like there were in the past, but there are far more days that I choose to see that the things I'm going through are actually all lessons, and that they're all, that none of them are in vain, that everything that I'm going through has a component that I can teach to the planet and synthesize in my own mind to get my own exploration, my own growth as a human being. And, it is a choice. People try to control a lot of things. They try to, and I think that attachment to control is what causes them to suffer so much. I choose to look at, there's only two things that we really do have the power to control. One is our interpretations, what we make something mean. And something happens to us and then we go, am I going to make this mean that the world is against me, or that I'm going to need to grow into a better person? Am I going to make this mean that I'm cursed, or am I going to make this mean that I'm being put through a gauntlet of strength, that I'm going to come out the other side so much better? However you choose to frame it. And some people might think, well, that's just tricking your brain. Well, all of life is tricking your brain. Being negative is a trick on the brain. Being positive is a trick on the brain. Everything we do is just getting the mind to focus on what we want, and sometimes people focus a lot of energy on what they don't want, and that's why they're miserable. So we have control over our interpretations, and we also have control. The second is our responses, how we respond to things that happen to us. Now notice I didn't say react. Reaction is like a knee-jerk response, or a knee-jerk, whereas a response here is more of a conscious decision. It's not a knee-jerk reflex, if you will. And so you have control over what you make things mean, and you have control over how you respond to things. You don't really have control over much more beyond that. You don't have control over your body at all times. You don't have control over other people's decisions. You don't have control over the weather, the government. You can certainly influence those things, but you don't have full 100% control over anything but your interpretation and your response. And so I feel like, how did I get through it? How did I choose a better attitude? By making things mean that things go my way, and by responding by saying, how can I respond in a way that I'm A, not going to regret, and B, is going to be for the betterment of me and all those around me. And it's a choice that I have to make every day. Every day things happen to me that if I wanted to, I could scream out to the world, this world sucks. And then my belief would then permeate into the universe, and I would get all these examples of where my world sucks. If I yelled out into the world, this is an amazing life, and that echoed out into the universe, then I would get all of the amazing examples of what's going on around me, put before me. And so, 80% of life, this is my made-up statistic, but 80% of life is in the way you view it. Only 20% of your life is what's really happening. 80% is your processing it and how you respond to it. So I always tell people, work on your psychology. People always they want the get rich quick techniques. They want to, lose weight quick techniques. They want to find love quick techniques. And that's going about it all wrong. That's acting as if that you snap your fingers and you get things without putting in the effort. The effort is having the patience. The effort is the consistency and the rituals that you have to do to get the money, get the love, get the wealth, or get the health. And I look back on my entire lifetime and I see that when I was my happiest was when I remembered these lessons that I'm sharing. When I was my most upset, I either didn't know these lessons or I refused to do anything about them and was choosing to be cranky, choosing to be ornery.
So you bring up two really important things. Perception is a key one and what we focus on. So like you said, if we focus on the world is against me, or like you said, the world is an angry place, or I choose to see things, or life is a beautiful place. That's the one thing is like I won't watch 11 o'clock news because everything is someone died, someone killed, someone did this, someone did that, versus I don't want to focus on that. I mean, it's not that I choose to be naive about what's going out there, because I could just look on, go on Google or look at Twitter or go on any social media platform and I'll see everything that's going on if I want to know what's going on. So I do know what's going on in the world. At the same time, I don't want to be bombarded by watching 11 o'clock news and be bombarded by negativity all in 1 hour. So I choose to know that I can be in peace and harmony within myself. That's a really important piece. I don't think people really realize that. They only choose to think that there's war. They only choose to think that everything's negative, negative, negative. They don't choose to think that there could be peace and harmony or within the world. So that's a really important piece, perspective, what they're choosing to focus on. So I think that was really important that you brought that up. Our filters, so what we filter on, this is what we're going to see, like the horse with the blinders on, instead of having an open view of what could be there. So I think that was a really important piece that you brought up. So the other things I'd like to bring, I really want to talk about your book, Get Off Your Butt, the B-U-T. We're not talking about B-U-T-T, although they're intertwined in some way. But let's talk about your book. And I really do want to address bullying. So I don't know if you want to start with bullying or talk about your book. I definitely want to address those two big things.
Well, what do you want to talk about with my book?
Let's actually segue, because we're talking about psychology here, but let's actually segue into bullying.
Okay. What about it?
Let's talk about especially kids in school. Let's start with the younger kids, because we're starting with younger kids because that's where it starts. I find that we start with younger kids, and then obviously can trail up into high school. So let's start with the younger kids in elementary school. They're dealing with bullying, and it's very interesting what's going on now in schools, because there's people saying, well, we need to teach our kids how to fight back. If they can fight back and punch back, then they're going to be fine. We shouldn't be protecting our kids from being bullied. They need to just learn to punch back, and they'll be fine. And there are some people saying that, that's not true, we just need to stop bullying. So what are your thoughts on that? Should we teach our kids to basically, put up their fists and fight back, and they'll be able to protect themselves, and that's how we handle bullying? Or do we need to, in my opinion, we need to teach our kids respect and understand that there is no need to be bullying. I don't think we should be teaching our kids just to fight. I don't think that's a solution either. I think, I don't think just teaching our kids to fight is going to stop bullying. I don't think that's the answer. So what are your thoughts on bullying, and how do we actually get, kids to understand there's actually no purpose in bullying?
So the way I look at it is kind of parallel to sexual assault for women. Do we put all our attention on teaching women self-defense courses, or do we go after teaching men to respect women, or do we crack down on mental health that causes people to, because rape is not an act of sex, it's an act of power. And so, there's like 3 different ways, if many more, to handle something like sexual assault. Same thing with bullying, is I don't see it as there's got to be one response. I do think it's sad that we've gotten to a point where we're feeling the need to teach our kids self-defense to deal with the issue. But I certainly am not a father yet, so I don't know how I would feel if my kid was getting slapped around in a corner and there was no teacher there to protect him. That would be of concern to me. But is the answer to teach him how to fight? Probably not. I think the answer is going deeper than that. I think it's the answer of teaching our students as a student body about things like self-esteem, things like insecurity, addressing fear, addressing the differences between all of us. You know, I've worked with a lot of student bullies, and you know, student bullies don't just come out of nowhere. They were raised in a environment where bullying either saved them from their environment or it was the lack of attention. I mean, there's so many different things that foster bullying in the bully. And I feel like what would be best is to put time, money, and resources behind what causes bullies to be bullies, because they're not bad human beings that should be thrown away. They are probably coming from environments where their parents and lack of parental guidance are present. And it's easy then to be mad at the parents that are causing the bullying. But, you know, this is a big systemic issue. This is a big issue that we have to look at as an insecurity issue. When human beings, no matter what age they are, when they don't feel like they're enough, when they feel like outsiders, they will lash out. They will do things a violent towards others and a violent towards self way. And when we address the fact that people are enough and how to work on your life so that you don't feel things like envy and jealousy and hatred, and when you address how to have gratitude, when you address how to have compassion and empathy and communication skills to use your words, not your fists. And, you know, I'm not a rose-colored glasses kind of guy. I'm certainly, if I was a parent and my child was being slapped around, I would teach the kid, you get yourself in a scenario like that, you get out of there. You don't sit and take a beating, you get out of there. I don't necessarily teach him to bully back. But again, I'm not a parent, so I have to look at this from a broader perspective and say, we teach children to respect themselves, they will have no interest or desire to bully.
And the one thing that I think that most people don't realize too, because I work with a lot of people who've have either post-traumatic stress disorder or a lot of people who've been sexually abused, etc., is a lot of bullying, and I've also worked a lot with children as well, is that a lot of these kids have also been either smacked around or been abused at home of some kind. So they, and also not only at home, they've also been victimized outside of the home. So they have had some sort of abuse, some kind, whether it's been verbal abuse or physical abuse of some kind. So it's come from somewhere. It's not like they all of a sudden just became bullies, like you said. It has come from somewhere. So I think, like you said, education of some kind has to be put in place for the whole. Like when we have grand assemblies at the school, we should be putting in place bully, you know, some sort of teaching that the whole school is being taught about bullying.
Student respect program.
Exactly.
Student respect programs.
Self-respect. Teaching about self-esteem, like I said, all those things you just talked about. It needs to be in place in every school where the kids are being taught these things. That, since they're not, obviously, all of them are not getting it at home. Either it's one-parent home, or like you said, there's abuse in the home, or there's abuse outside of the home. Wherever these kids have gotten these traits, there has to be some sort of schooling of some kind where they're getting some taught, you know, psychology taught. Because you can't just pick out the bullies and go, only we're teaching the bullies, because then they're being, again, singled out and they feel like they're being picked out even more. So we need to address the whole school, not just pick on the kids that are bullies.
Right, and that's why it's got to be about student self-respect to the whole student body.
Now, you said earlier when we were talking before the interview that there's a distinguishing, or maybe not distinguishing, but there is a little bit difference when kids are younger and older. Can you actually talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I kind of look at bullying as prepubescent and post-pubescent, you know, like puberty hit, before and after. And I feel that a lot of bullying that takes place before puberty is a different level of intensity than after puberty. After puberty bullying, I feel, has a lot of misguided sexual energy and a lot of misunderstanding of the body and a misunderstanding of respecting both genders and sexual orientations, and there's a lot having to do with our sexuality after puberty. Whereas the younger you can get to them and impress upon them self-respect before the hormones start to race, the easier it is to speak English to them. Once a human starts producing all their sexual hormones, they literally become like little drug addicts. And I don't mean drug in terms of like heroin or cocaine. I'm talking about the drugs that the body produces. The mind becomes clouded and overwhelmed with all kinds of feelings and mood swings and desires, and to have all that show up in a mind that is not fully developed to understand it all in today's society, it's an interesting experience. And so I feel that if you get to them before puberty, you can perpetuate self-respect. You can perpetuate respect of others. You can perpetuate the feelings of empathy and the feelings of wanting to make sure that everyone around you is taken care of, not just yourself. If you try to impress upon a young adult later in life, teenage, high school, and college level, it's still possible to make the impact. I'm not saying that it's not. I've certainly given many student assemblies to high schools and colleges. However, the children are far more impressionable. And I think it's easier to mold a child than it is to change an adult. And when you start talking about teenage and beyond, you're starting to talk about the beginning stages of adulthood.
I can see that. Actually, I can totally understand what you're saying. It is much harder to deal with teenagers when they are going through all those changes. I completely understand what and actually, I'm really glad you brought that up, because that is a really good point. So let's talk about some of the things you're actually working on right now. So what are you working on right now?
Well, I'm entering into a new phase of my career. I've been a professional speaker for about 17 years now, and I've been very blessed. And I try to say this as humbly as possible, but I've shared the stage with people like the Dalai Lama and President Clinton and Tony Robbins, some big names, Richard Branson, and I've been blessed to see much of this world, from the richest luxury resorts around the world to some of the most impoverished parts of our planet. And I'm at the point now where I'm only 35 years old, but I probably feel more like I'm in my mid-50s because I've been doing this for 17 years, and I've been on so many airplanes. I know I probably lost a couple of years just in time zones. And so I look at my life now, and I'm in the process of transitioning into the next phase, which is teaching people how to become speakers, teaching people how to find their voice, teaching people how to craft a career in the art, science, and business of professional speaking. And so now I'm offering products and services, specifically live events in where I live, in Scottsdale, Arizona, where people can fly to me. I don't have to get on the plane, they can, and I will teach them how I built a 17-year career that has reached millions of people around the world through live events, as well as the videos that I've been on and the television shows. And so now I'm in the process of wanting to help people find their voice, not just continue to share mine. And so that's the biggest project that I'm working on right now, is teaching people how do you find your voice, position your voice, package your voice, and promote that voice. And those are all very key elements when you want to get into speaking. And I found that there's a lot of programs out there on how to be a speaker, but they usually either fixate on the marketing side or the speaking side, the craft of speaking. And I feel that it needs to be a beautiful blend of the two. You need to be really good at what you do and how you do it, and you also need to be well at sharing it with the world and knowing how what marketing channels you need to utilize so that people know that you're available to talk on those topics. So now I'm in that phase of my life. It's a lot of fun. I am very blessed to um, be able to unearth some of the most inspiring stories that are not being told in the world right now.
That sounds like a lot of fun, and I'm sure you're probably enjoying not flying all over the place for a little while.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about your book.
Well, what about it?
Well, I'd love for you to share about a little bit about not going into the buts.
Sure. So when we talk about butts, the B-U-T-S, we're talking about one of three things. Either our butt fears, and that always starts with but what if, our butt insecurity, or butt excuses, I'll go on to that next, our butt excuses, but I don't have the, and then the third is the butt insecurities, and that's the but I'm not. And whenever you're saying but what if, but I don't have the, or but I'm not, those three really halt progress in your life. But fears like, but what if I fail? But what if I look bad? What if I let other people down? But the but excuses are the, but I don't have the time, but I don't have the money, but I don't have the energy. And the but insecurities, but I'm not tall enough, but I'm not thin enough, but I'm not smart enough, but I'm not educated enough. Anytime you are saying one of these three, or if not all three of these buts, you are halted in your evolution as a person. You're halted in the evolution of whatever you're working on. And so all progress stops when we hit one of these components. And, we just used a fun, catchy play on words with but in the end, it's all about self-sabotage. It's all about wanting to do something, but then oftentimes doing the exact opposite actions that you need to do to get there. And, we see this most in New Year's Eve. People set their New Year's resolutions, and then 1 month in, they're nowhere to be found. And so why is that? Well, it's because that mentality is you want something, but you have fears, excuses, and insecurities that rise up and really block your progress. So that whole book is all about how do we counteract those three things that show up in our life.
So now, what inspired you to write that book, Get Off Your Butt? Get Off Your Butts.
I was inspired because I've written previous books to that, and I found that a book can go places that I cannot. A book can be on a nightstand of a mother who just lost their child. A book can be on a nightstand of a little kid who's getting bullied at their school. A book can show up on a car ride for a couple who is on the verge of considering divorce. A book can show up in a banker's office from somebody who is dealing with financial bankruptcy and is considering ending their life because they don't know how they're going to move forward without crumbling financially. And so a book can go places that I cannot. And that was probably the biggest motivator. Plus, a book is going to last longer than me. I'll be lucky if I get another 75 years. That would be amazing. However, that book, if it's kept in circulation and put on things like Kindle and it's on iTunes in audio format, and that book will continue to ripple out into the universe long after my bones have deteriorated from this planet. And that's important to me, because that means I didn't just come here, do something for myself, and disappear. It makes me feel like I was able to contribute to future generations that I'll never get to meet. And that was important to me, not from an ego standpoint of, I hope they remember Sean Stephenson and build statues in my name or any of that garbage. It's more about, I want people to take what I extracted from my life, and if they're able to utilize it and implement it into their life might get easier or be more enjoyable, or they're able to help inspire other people. And that really feels good, and that's why I wanted something out there where I couldn't be.
So basically, and that's what I love about you, you teach and inspire people because you want to give the gift of knowledge that you've learned through your life. And that's why I do what I do. That's why I do these shows. I mean, I don't have people sponsor these shows, and I don't have little I don't sit there and stop and go, it's, you know, I need to give kudos to this person, this person, this person. I don't, people say, why don't you monetize things? I don't want to monetize these. I do these shows because I want people to have valuable content that they can learn from. And that's what these shows are, one way I get to give back. So I think it's very valuable that people find at least one or two passions where they can give back and give valuable content, like you said, through books or Kindle or something, where they're getting their knowledge out for people to be able to go back to and resource. Because we're one person. We can't be everywhere all the time. Yes, we can do live seminars. Yes, we can do this, we can do that. But we can't be everywhere, like you said. So I think that's great. And since this is also a podcast, can you please let everyone know where they can find you?
Sure. So they can go to www.seanstephenson, that's SeanStephenson.com. And I have lots of free resources for those that want to continue to learn from me, and as well as live resources of trainings and products. But in the end, I just really hope that something that we talked about today really made an impact for the person that needed it the most.
I always find there's always someone somewhere that needs to hear exactly what we said today. I just really find that. It's like there can be 10 people reading the exact same thing or listening to the exact same thing, and they'll get something different out of it. And it's something they needed to hear exactly at that moment. So I thank you so much for spending this time with me. I know you have a very busy schedule. I'm truly honored that you joined me. You're an amazing man. Thank you so much for everything that you do for everybody. And I wish you much, much success. And thank you so much for being with me. It's just been a joy.
Thank you, Carly. I appreciate being on your program.
Thank you. And you've been with Carly Alyssa Thorne, your host, and you can find me at carlyalyssathorne.com. That's CarlyAlyssatHorne.com. I look forward to being with everyone next week and bringing you more valuable content. Thank you so much. Enjoy and have a wonderful evening. Till next week.